Welcome to Seth University. My name is Dr. Sethi Davis. Seth University aims to collapse the boundaries between the academy and the larger world. By focusing on Black queer life, we aim to promote dialogue and liberation. If that sounds interesting to you, feel free to subscribe and click like. On today's episode of Seth on Campus, I'm giving you some life updates, a little historical perspective, and I'm giving you a little feedback on this new affirmative action dismantling Supreme Court ruling. So again, if that sounds interesting to you, feel free to keep watching. Okay, so I got some news. I got some new life news or whatever. So I haven't been able to post videos and make videos in quite some time because I've been like really busy. You know, shout out to Seth for being really busy. But I got a brand new job. So as some of you guys know, when I first started Seth University, I first moved back to Memphis. I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee, and I had moved to Boston for a job at Curry College in Milton, Massachusetts, which is right outside of Boston, Massachusetts. But with COVID and then the death of my father, I decided to relocate back to Memphis. So, in living in Memphis, I had to stick it out. I had to wait for about a year and a half in order to find a job. And so I finally found a job at Lemoyne-Owen College in Memphis, Tennessee. So Lemoyne-Owen College is a historically Black college that was founded in 1866. Again, one of those colleges that were founded exactly for and exclusively for the education of Black folks. When white colleges were not letting Black people in, when the larger government did not give a damn about the education, emancipation, freedom, edification, all those education words, folks didn't give a damn about it. Back when Black lives mattered even less than they do now, Lemoyne-Owen was one of those colleges that were educating Black folks and made it their prerogative to do so. So I'm very proud in being part of the faculty there. Another reason that I'm proud of being part of the faculty there is that I am a product of historically Black colleges myself. I attended Tennessee State University in Nashville, Tennessee for my undergrad. So of course I understand the role that historically Black colleges play in the larger community, but specifically in the lives of Black people, Black students, and Black faculty. Hey, again, Dr. Sethi Davis is now Assistant Professor of English at Lemoyne-Owen College. So check this out. Not only am I a professor of English, but this happens at a lot of small liberal arts colleges. Like, they have you in a couple of houses. So I am both a professor, I'm housed as an English professor, but I also teach classes in the journalism communication program because I have a bachelor's and a master's. Bachelor's in speech communication and theater, and a master's in communication studies. So with that being said, I teach both in the English program and also in the journalism and communication program at So keep in mind, so check this out. Being from Memphis, I pronounce it Lemoyne-Owen like most times. But now that I work there, I feel like I have to like step into the full professional stance. I'm like, I teach at Lemoyne-Owen College, not Lemoyne-Owen. So, just put that out there. But seeing that we're talking about Lemoyne-Owen College, I feel like it's necessary to talk about a little bit of Memphis history. So one of the most interesting things I find about Lemoyne-Owen College is both, of course, its legacy of people like Dr. Willie Harrington, first Black mayor of Memphis, Marion Barry, first Black mayor of DC, legendary mayor, gets reelected in spite of, but that's, my frat brother, so I ain't going to say what the ... is, but y'all got Google and Wikipedia, so look it up. And so, like, a lot of influential people have gone to, have attended Lemoyne-Owen College. And again, as the only historically Black college in Memphis, Tennessee, it has always been a pillar. It's definitely been, it's the first, I think one of the first places that I saw a step show. My dad definitely took me to Lemoyne-Owen plenty of times throughout my childhood. especially keep in mind for black bougie folks that are HBCU grads, it's a big deal to expose their children to historically black college culture. And I definitely was one of those people. I come from one of those families that I have historically black college graduates on both sides of my family. So with that being said, like, it's always had a special place. Now, of course, I went on to Tennessee State University, a good public state institution that was given full and complete financial aid. Amen. So, that's where I got my degree from. But at the same time, all respect to Lemoyne-Owen College, Lane College, Russ College, Fisk University, Meharry, and so many other historically black colleges that educate people in the area. So another reason that I think it's interesting as host of Seth University to point out that now I'm a professor at historically black colleges. While I was a student at Tennessee State University, I was I both no. Another reason that I feel that it's interesting to highlight the fact that I'm now a professor at Lemoyne-Owen College is that I'm somewhat going through this kind of a different world Dwayne Wayne full circle moment, going from being an undergraduate student at Tennessee State University to now being a professor at Lemoyne-Owen, a professor at a historically black college. What's interesting about it for me is that being an undergrad, I definitely was somewhat of a HBCU troll. Not a troll against the historically black colleges or the idea of historically black college. Baby, I'm all that. Like, my family is that. That's been my culture all my life. Going to classics, Southern Heritage classics, Bayou classics, Magic City classics. Like, I grew up going to all that. But when I say HBCU troll, it's like, no, I was opinions editor of The Meter, which is the newspaper at Tennessee State University. And so the whole time, like, in retrospect, now I can see is that, like, I was critiquing HBCU culture the whole time. Now, based on who I was at the time, like, I was out, but I wasn't, like, out politically. So with that being said, like, the things that I had an issue with was more like misogyny more broadly and the privileging of Greeks more largely while still wanting to be one, but not anything too deep or too profound. I think in retrospect, I was really more just an angsty undergrad that, hated the undergraduate institution because I hadn't graduated yet. But at the same time, there was some real shit going on at TSU at the time. Like, specifically the ways that administration was funneling money away from the student newspaper at the time, allegedly, but also funneling money away from student activities more generally. And there was a larger distrust for administration at the time from the student body. So when I went to TSU, it was between the years of 2006 and 2009. And so graduated 2009 because, in these days you can't just say that you went, you got to say you graduated. But yeah, there was a larger distrust for the administration at that time. Not just by like the typical newspaper crowd, but also by like student government and also by MPHC. There was definitely a kind of organizing or coming to terms with students around the years of, I would say, 2008, 2011. Do I think it came of much? No. But I would also see this type of same student organizing happening at Syracuse University with the general body, which did come of something and was able to get some real change happening at the university. But at the same time, keep in mind I've been on both sides of it, both as a student and as faculty, and I definitely feel student organizing is a very important part of the college experience. Both just activity organizing and building with other people with shared interests, I think is important as a lifelong skill. But also, I think college is a lot of people's first engagement with larger institutions, but specifically larger institutions that don't have the consumers or the individuals or the students' interests at mind at all times. And so, with that being said, just like trustee boards, just like larger sponsorships or entities that are invested in the university, students essentially have to make their voices heard and be very clear about what it is that they want the education that they're paying for. Just like consumers at any other institution, they have to make their voices heard about what it is that they expect and want from their university. And when they're not being heard, they have to make their voices heard in other ways. So again, organizing, whether we're talking about students or we're talking about the larger culture, here at Seth University, we promote that. Specifically, Dr. Seth E. Davis promotes that. Another thing that I find interesting about working at Lemoyne-Owen is specifically its history. Its history in Memphis is history to Black folks. Lemoyne-Owen has been in existence since 1862. So like, it was established to educate recently freed slaves. And keep in mind, with 1862, we're in that time period where we're still talking about folks still being enslaved. We're talking about in the midst of a civil war. We're talking about life and safety and everything being very precarious and up in the air for Black folks. You know, child, tomorrow could be freedom. Yesterday was subjugation. What could be tomorrow, what could be a year from now is anything, is anyone's guess. So everything is up in the air for Black folks. One of the key points in history, specifically in Memphis history, is that 1866 was what has been termed oftentimes in white history is the 1866 race riots, but no, it's the 1866 race massacres. We're talking about high racial tensions in the mid 1860s. When I'm talking about racial tensions, we're really talking about white people on both sides of the fence, whether we're talking about Union soldiers, Confederate soldiers, and also what do we call non-people that aren't in the services? Comment, y'all know what I'm talking about. Either way, damn near all white folks except for abolitionists are hostile to Black lives. So a conflict happens between regular Black residents and soldiers and white soldiers. And this turns into what is the race riots of 1866, or the race massacre of 1866, where white folks and some white police officers end up burning down, torching down the Black community, killing and raping Black people, and they burnt Lemoyne-Owen College, where I work currently, to the ground. So the building that I currently work in, Steele Hall, they burnt all this to the ground, you know. Now the good thing about, you know, the resilience of Black folks and the resilience of Black folks working with white people and other people of color in order to survive. In a lot of ways, we've been able to rebuild a lot of churches. We've been able to rebuild a lot of schools that were burnt down in white hatred of Black progress. You know, but with that being said, these things still happen, and we still have to remember that they happen. And one of the, I'm not even going to say good things, but one of the important things that comes from the 1866 race riots is specifically the Supreme Court testimonies that come from that, where specifically victims of the Memphis race riots came out and testified before the Supreme Court about what happened. And specifically to LGBTQ history, we would not know the name Frances Thompson if it was not for her testimony before the Supreme Court. Specifically, Frances Thompson is one of the, if not the earliest Black trans person that we have on record to testify before the Supreme Court. Now, of course, under the most awful circumstances. So what happens during the Memphis Race Massacre is Frances Thompson was living in a house with other women, I believe cisgender women and trans women. Now keep in mind, Frances Thompson is what we consider now a trans woman, you know. During that time, definitely someone that was living as a woman. So she's living as a woman with these other women, and white soldiers end up taking control over their house and forcing them to cook food for them and basically living with them. And through this time period, they end up sexually abusing, raping these women, including Frances Thompson. And part of the reason that we even know trans women existed in the 1800s is because Frances Thompson, along with several other women, testified before the Supreme Court about what happened during the 1866 race massacres. So, to me, Memphis Black history is innately tied to gay history, to LGBTQ history. And keep in mind, me as a Black Memphis gay native, these histories are innately tied in my body. But for me, as a historian and an intellectual, these histories are innately tied, because when we talk about intersectionality, a theory that has gained traction, coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, but at the same time has been talked about, overlapping oppressions has been talked about by Black women since probably beginning of time, but since at least the 1800s. When we're talking about this, we're talking about a Black trans woman being caught at the intersections of race, essentially the race massacre, but also gender politics, meaning where she was living and the ways in which these white men felt that they could take over this space. We're talking about an example of intersectionality that predates Ava DuVernay, because these women then testify before the Supreme Court and essentially nothing comes of it. Like these men don't get locked up or put away or anything like that, because there's, as Kimberly Crenshaw would say, there's really no state apparatus where there's an understanding for Black folks, Black men, to be understood as having humanity or having any sense of agency. Black women, essentially none at all. And Black queer people, Black trans folks, girl, please. We're living in a time now that folks can barely conceive of Black queer people, Black trans people. We're living in a time now where Black trans people are under attack, and are still suffering from murder at high rates, and the larger government or the larger populace or the larger, Black community, is somewhat silent about it, So with that being said, these type of conversations that are seemingly fresh or progressive or new, no, Black women, Black queer people, Black trans people have been trying to have these conversations, have been living these realities all along, have been living these realities on college campuses all along. One last thing I want to talk about before we leave here today is something that just came out last week, and of course this is going to date the video, but such is life, I upload things when I can, I have a full-time job now, amen, and all that good stuff. But recently, since the last time I uploaded a video, a couple things have happened. One, the state of Tennessee, specifically Governor Bill Lee, he passed a ban on public trans, or not public trans, but on public drag performances, and on trans affirming healthcare for children. Now the good thing about it is, since that has happened, federal judges have repealed both bans, so that's a great thing. But another thing that has happened recently, which is far more intense on a larger national level, the Supreme Court has recently, a couple of months ago, they repealed Roe versus Wade, which made it so that each state determines its own abortion laws. So for Tennessee, that automatically banned abortion here. So that's one thing that we're dealing with, or that we're suffering from here. But another thing that we're suffering from is that last week they repealed, what is it called? they made a ruling about affirmative action, specifically looking at a case with Harvard and a Carolina school. And so now colleges are not to engage race when determining entrances and what students enter their schools. And the reason that this is important, now keep in mind, while I teach at a historically black college and I went to undergrad at a historically black college, I also got my master's from Ball State University in communication studies and my PhD in composition and cultural rhetoric from Syracuse University, two predominantly white institutions. And with that being said, part of the reason that affirmative action has been necessary in higher education is that racism is still a thing. Racism is still a thing now. Racism has been a thing. And that bleeds into both hiring practices and that bleeds into who college administrators want to accept into their institutions. And one of the reasons that affirmative action was necessary, it acknowledges the fact that talent and intelligence is evenly spread throughout all backgrounds. However, who has access to education, who has access to opportunity, is most often skewed towards white people and is most often skewed towards males in particular. So when we're talking about people that benefit from when we're talking about people that benefit from affirmative action, one, we're talking about the whole culture, everyone, but we're also talking about women, white women, but we're also talking about people of color. So the thing that gets me about the ban against affirmative action, the ban against affirmative action, but the ban against engaging race and hiring practices, it suggests that all of racism has been absolved and taken care of, basically because there's been a black president, or basically because there's more than one black Supreme Court justice. But we have countless examples in law enforcement, we have countless examples in education, we have countless examples in entertainment, we have countless examples in politics where racism is still a moving and control. Not just racism, but white supremacy is still a moving and controlling factor in the ways in which our society is structured. And affirmative action is an attempt, emphasis on attempt, because it definitely did not solve everything, is an attempt on trying to counteract this common sense notion of white is right, male is right, English only. And so it definitely is a step in the wrong direction. And it's a confirmation of a worst nightmare that I feel most people of color, me in particular, felt while navigating higher education, that while we knew we were there on our own merits and we knew we were there out of an attempt to diversify the space, at the same time, we also knew that the opportunity that we were presented was not going to last. Whether it being funding for Black studies or women gender studies programs or social justice emphasizing programs, we knew that funding may not last always. But also what's going on now, keep in mind, Black folks that have survived white supremacy have seen this before. It comes up every 10, 20 years. This interest in diversity was going to wane. So I've seen this literally in my educational experience, that when I first attended Syracuse University as a doctoral student, Chancellor Nancy Cantor was there, and one of her many initiatives was diversity. So you saw far more Black and brown students, especially students from New York, that were there. Also, what I saw was a transition about conversations about school to evaluating from evaluating a diversity to then this kind of conversation about schools and rankings, and Syracuse is now considered a party school, and then also not being really confirming how y'all understand a party school, how it comes to be understood this way. And then a new chancellor, Ken Siverud, being put in position that has a totally opposite understanding of what both diversity means, but also what the school's direction should be. So that was both the installation of the promenade that was millions of dollars or whatever, and most of the students were like, this is a glorified walkway, why is this here? But also, you saw less students of color. Now keep in mind, as a doctoral student, I was there for 7 years. So I was there from the year 2011 to 2018. So I saw it go from, a diverse, somewhat urban student body to a majority white and international Asian student body. Because keep in mind, when we're talking about those Asian international students, we're talking about big money. We're talking about they coming up with the fashions. We're talking about they're coming up with the Teslas. We're talking about they're paying full tuition. They're paying full room and board. And again, no disrespect to them. Shout out to them and shout out to the work that they do at the university and the fashions. But the real issue is white is still the majority, and that essentially non-white people are always fighting for the same 10, 20%. 10, 20, 30% of the student body of the workforce, while the majority of the student body is white, And so keep in mind, while affirmative action was in place, that was the norm. While affirmative action was in place, black and brown go in and out of style as far as hiring practices, as far as universities. So now that people don't even have to legally pretend like it's diverse, we're about to really see a time period where folks don't have to let students of color in. Folks don't have to let or hire people of color. We're starting to see a door going down, behind us. And keep in mind, a certain Supreme Court justice whose name I won't say because he's ugly, both inside and out, but again, benefited from affirmative action. And I won't even say that it's like personal, as in like he has a vendetta against other black people. I just think he's bought and paid for. Like, it's already been well reported on who's invested, who's paid for his lifestyle, who's paid for his relatives' lives, who paid for his mama's life. So with that being said, like, to wonder why him and then a majority white Supreme Court that would not see the benefit of affirmative action, would not see the benefit of diversity. These things happen because they're set up to happen. So again, I couldn't talk about education, I couldn't talk about my new job without acknowledging that this happened, that this is going to have a big effect on education. But also, as a historically black college professor, I have to remind y'all that the role of the black church, the role of the black college stays the same. As in, it is always our role to educate black folks. It is always our role to liberate black folks. Now, keep in mind, based on my experience with both, HBCUs ain't perfect, black churches ain't perfect, baby, child. They ain't even holding down all black folks. All black lives have not mattered to HBCUs. All black lives have not mattered to black churches. The receipts are out there. But I also feel like we're at a time of changing culture, consciousness. I also feel like we're at a time where HBCUs are opening LGBTQ resource centers. I'm thinking of Spelman. I think Bowie is another one. I'm thinking about both black LGBTQ churches that are straight up affirming, some in Memphis. And I'm also thinking about, black churches that are being more progressive and being more open-minded. So it is not that the story is over. I have to remind myself, both in my relationships, but both in my dealings with institutions, specifically black institutions, that there has to be room for redemption. There has to be room for folks to change their ways and look out for and truly love. And so with that being said, I do see potential in many spaces. Hell, my black gay ass was hired at a historically black college. So I see that as a move in that direction, So with that being said, I bid you guys adieu. Those are the updates. Other than that, ain't really shit been going on. You know, I've taken a couple trips that I hope to upload videos about shortly, but you know, it's just been mainly teaching these classes. Like I said, I teach English and communication classes. This past semester, I taught English communication, which is basically freshman communication or freshman composition 1 and 2. I taught a global humanities class, and I taught a minorities in the media communication class. In the summer, I'm teaching just freshman composition classes, which is what I'm in right now. We call them English communication. And then in the fall, I'm teaching 2 journalism and communication classes. History, I think it's history of journalism and intro to mass comm. Those are 2 communication classes. And then I'm also teaching English communication 1 and 2. So I look forward to it. This is going to be my first semester face to face at Lemoyne Owen. So I'm looking forward to that because, woo, this hybrid thing has been working me out. But, you know, I'm saying that is a thing of the past. That's yesterday. I'm focusing on today and tomorrow. So I look forward to, you know, in person, face to face, you know, teaching. But yeah, so that's the life update. You know, I'm finally back in my my intellectual bag. Also, I presented at Computers and Writing in Davis, California. I presented on my research on Black Santas. Specifically, I looked at one of the Facebook groups where people find Black Santas for their kids and critically engage with how they do that. So, you know, like I said, I'm getting back in my professor bag, so that's exciting. But other than that, it's the same old, same old. So I will see you all next time. Thank you for tuning in to Seth University. Peace out.